Eco-Modernist Society of North America. I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental ecological crisis. It is only through a new environmentalism 2.0 that progress can be made. We believe that our only hope for human advancement and even human survival is through the exponential advance of science in the service of humanity. We stand firmly against the war on science that is predicated on the appeal to nature fallacy, which is the belief that whatever is natural must be good and whatever is unnatural must be bad. This belief has become an impediment to advances in areas such as human health, social progress, and even environmental progress. In the field of medicine, the appeal to nature fallacy has already led to catastrophic outcomes. Resistance to vaccines threatens public health and the lives of children. The unwarranted resistance to GMOs has not only held back the fight against climate change, but it has also hampered our ability to feed the developing world as well. Campaigns against GMOs have also held back efforts to ward off the deadly Aedes aegypti mosquito, which has killed countless millions as a carrier of disease and plagues. The scientific consensus concerning the safety of GMOs is solidly supported in every major scientific organization across the planet. The only thing green about being anti-GMO is the extra cash that is made by overcharging for expensive boutique food. But that won't cut it when it comes to raising crops with accelerating heat stress, droughts, floods, disease, and insect infestations brought on by a hotter planet. It makes no sense to accept the call of the IPCC for decarbonization within the next 12 years and yet reject their conclusion that these goals are impossible without nuclear power, which has proven itself to be the cleanest, safest, and most reliable way of achieving decarbonization. It is the most reliable way to decarbonize simply because the alternatives of weather-dependent power sources are inherently unreliable. And nuclear is the cleanest energy source because it is the only form of energy production that completely encases its waste stream. Super safe, advanced Generation 4 reactors, which will almost completely convert existing nuclear waste to centuries worth of energy, are coming very close to commercialization. In fact, it goes completely against most everything we're led to believe, but nuclear is legitimately the safest form of energy generation according to all the accepted worldwide energy fatality data. But there is one thing that nuclear is not safe for, and that is the fossil fuel industry. The fact of the matter is that the fossil fuel industry has a long history of funding the anti-nuclear movement, along with climate change deniers, to protect their bottom line. Solid science is in dire need of a champion, and that is what eco-modernism is all about. Eco-modernism is a new environmental paradigm which looks to reverse the fear of nuclear power and scientific progress in general. Ecology-based modernism is the most direct way to define it. Eco-modernism as a philosophy is described in the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. We believe humanity should not be rejecting technological progress, but rather separate our impacts from nature through the responsible use of technology and urbanization. Urbanization is an unstoppable worldwide trend and the best solution to many environmental problems. It offers sustainable development for the human population and is a historic antidote to both deforestation and species extinction, as humans move away from using wildlife as their protein source. Vertical, urban, high-rise architecture minimizes the use of land, resources, and energy, enabling walkable cities that facilitates the more efficient use of mass public transit as well. It must be emphasized that our support for technological solutions is definitely not about defending industrial polluters, nor do we accept funding from corporations or industry. Nor does our defense of technology imply that we just need to sit back and let things take care of themselves. To the contrary, we believe that humanity is at a crossroads that severely threatens our future on this planet. We reject the idea of resource limits on many levels. The advance of science has a long history of getting around problems of resource scarcity and will continue to do so. Another reason is that Earth is just one of a multitude of worlds available to explore in our solar system and beyond. Comets and asteroids are untapped reservoirs for raw materials. If we could find a way to thrive in artificial ecosystems off-world, we could use what we learn to help sustain terrestrial ecosystems here on Earth. I hope by now you understand the worthiness of our cause. Ecomodernism is really only a philosophy at this time. I want to talk to you about the necessity of turning it into a movement, which will be part of the larger environmentalist movement. For it is only through our presence and participation that there can be any hope of moving environmentalism in the right direction. Our aim is not to divide the environmental movement, but rather to multiply its numbers with the incorporation of many scientific and educational communities that is working to both build chapters of eco-modernist societies and support our growth worldwide. We aspire to increase our numbers by bringing together the numerous supporters of climate action that have been alienated by mainstream environmentalism's wildly contradictory support for the shutting down of nuclear power plants in the midst of a climate emergency, and welcome them into our ranks. Thank you.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube, EcoModder channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, EcoModder Society of North America.
And online at https ESNA.earth. Welcome to the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. We're a modern urbanist environmental organization with a focus on clean energy, housing density, and the application of technology in medicine and agriculture. We are privileged to bring you speakers with a focus on these and other areas in order to show you the future of a prosperous human civilization which preserves the Earth's wild spaces.
tell you something about this world I see. Let me tell you something, brother, about you and me. There's no such a thing called freedom, just a word they say. Freedom is in heaven, that's where it stays. Just a word they say. Freedom, just a word they say. Let me tell you something about this world I see. With my own two eyes, 20/20 vision. Let me tell you something, brother, about you and me. Just a word they say. Freedom is in heaven, that's where it stays. Freedom, just a word they say. Freedom, just a word they say.
Hello and welcome to the Eco-Modernist Channel Live. I'm Carl Pauls. I'm joined by Gabe Ignetti, Chris Bergen, and our good friend Mike. Let me make sure that I get your name right. We're joined by Mike Stasse today, who's from Australia and writes about the philosophy of degrowth. So we're going to get into the program and this talk with Mike right after I share with you a little bit of news. So very happy to announce that Miss Wisconsin, Grace Stanke, has been crowned Miss America for 2023. And Grace and I were to appear in a talk, DOE talk at the Global Clean Energy Action Forum. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it, but nonetheless, she's well known to the nuclear activist community. And so I'd like to congratulate Miss Stanke for her win. Great to see that she shared her passion for nuclear engineering, as well as a great violin solo with all sorts of choreography. I saw some coverage of that. So thank you, Miss Wisconsin, for spreading the love of nuclear engineering. Next announcement, the National Ignition Facility has, of course, achieved some kind of accomplishment. And what that means in this case is that the thermal energy is net positive. So we went from being like 50% of the thermal energy output from what the thermal energy input was to 150%. So like a 54% more than the energy put in. And that means that the reaction could perpetuate. So this National Ignition Facility is working with inertial confinement fusion. And I think there's a good, I don't see it in this one, but there's a really good diagram of the lasers hitting the inside of the hull realm, which is this device that changes the laser energy into X-ray energy, and then that X-ray energy becomes thermal energy in the hydrogen pellet. That's deuterium and tritium frozen pellet. So what does this mean? Well, I just described the number of steps that it took to deliver that thermal energy. And so, of course, while the press is feverishly reporting this as fusion is right around the corner, even from the DOE, we've been told that fusion plants will be here in less than 10 years. And that's not true, because it took 100 times the thermal output in input energy to achieve this experiment. Well, the basics of it is that this experiment was funded and sponsored by the NNSA. That's the National Nuclear Security Administration. And it's designed in order to verify computer experiments that are being run on our nuclear weapons stockpile. So this is a big shock to many of us in the environmental community, that fusion energy is being promoted, but it's actually, in this case, has immediate applications in nuclear weapons. So very, very trying news, and very trying to have this sort of greenwashed by the Biden administration. At any rate, welcome to the show, Mike. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the subject of your writing?
Well, I don't just write about degrowth. I write about all sorts of things. I started life as a civil engineer, and then I got sick of that, so I became a professional photographer. And then I got wiped out by the economy when it crashed in 1990. So I retrained in renewable energy technology, and because I thought at the time that renewable energy would save the day, which I now realise it won't. I also learned that the best way to combat all the issues that we've got regarding energy is actually to go energy efficient. And so I tried to start a business designing energy efficient houses, but the housing industry just wouldn't have it, and I just gave up in the end. And now I'm actually living in a zero energy house. Our place, and I live in southern Tasmania, which is not that cold, but it has snowed here once or twice. And we have lots of frosts in winter and so on, and we don't heat. The temperature in this house is 20 degrees Celsius, plus or minus 2 all year round, with no energy input at all.
Miracle.
No, this. Well, I don't know Fahrenheit. I live in the real world.
It's about 68.
I don't know why. I don't know why Americans haven't joined the international standards yet. It's our heat battery. It's our heat battery. It stores heat. It absorbs it when it's warm, and it emits it out again at night time. And there's a lot of it in the house, and it never gets cold here, or hot for that matter.
That's excellent. We need more houses like that, and then we wouldn't need furnaces, or the furnaces we have would be much smaller and run very sparingly, even in places like Denmark.
It's been done in Sweden.
Oh, I believe you. And Emery Lovins has done something similar with his place, only he's got 2 banana trees growing in his arboretum. He also has a zero or very near zero house in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains.
He's at 7,000 feet.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not that I agree with half of what he says, but I have to give him kudos for that.
Yeah. No, I used to be a big fan of Amory Lovins, but I agree with you. There's a whole lot of things that he says that I can no longer agree with.
So let me back us up just a moment. When I came back, you were
talking can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
You can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't hear Carlos talk. He's trying to say something.
Sorry. When I crashed, I came back muted. So, if you don't mind, please repeat just a bit. Let me see if I can find out where I dropped off.
You were talking when you dropped off.
Yeah, I just started talking. And
nothing earth-shattering there. So you can kind of continue. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with this idea of having a zero energy home. It's actually where I started sort of my environmental learnings at a high school retreat, or is that middle school retreat up into a sustainable community, environmental community, and I'm wondering if I'm really pleased with the passive house idea, and I think it's really wonderful. So you say the bricks. Do you have any thermal water storage, or is it just the bricks in your house?
There's a lot of concrete. The floor's a concrete slab. Mm-hmm. We have the house is a bit like an earth chip, but without the tires. And the back wall has no window, so we only have windows facing the equator. The back wall is a retaining wall, so we have like 6 feet of dirt pushed up against the back wall, which also adds to the thermal mass. So this house it's massive in its mass. It's actually quite small. It's only like 100 or 1,200 square feet in your measurements. But it's got 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It's got everything that opens and shuts. And we run the whole thing on 2 kilowatts of solar panels.
Wow.
And how much battery storage do you have for that solar?
10 kilowatt hours.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's and they're 120-year-old technology invented by Thomas Edison. All this stuff about lithium batteries is just a lot of crap. I can't believe it. I mean, obviously you can't carry heavy batteries in your cell phone and your laptop, but this lithium battery thing it's a real fad that I just can't wrap my head around. They're not very good. I don't even understand why they're making so many lithium batteries these days.
So is that lead acid batteries?
Because the batteries that I use, no, they're nickel iron.
Okay.
And actually, strangely enough, Thomas Edison invented nickel iron batteries to put in electric cars. It's not a well-known fact, but in between 1900 and 1920, nearly half the cars in America were electric.
Mm.
And it wasn't until Ford launched the Model T, which made it inexpensive for everyone to own a gasoline car. It was cheaper to have an electric car, and they all had nickel iron batteries in them because no one had invented lithium batteries then. Because nickel iron batteries are quite light; they're half the weight of a lead acid battery. But of course, the technology back then was awful, so they just could not compete with gasoline cars.
Right. My understanding is that the electric cars back a century ago were in many ways preferred by women or wives because they didn't have to mess with the dirty diesel or the oil or fixing it,
and they didn't have to
as much,
and they didn't have to hand crank them because in those days cars were hand cranked.
Yeah, that was
to start them by hand.
Very true. Very true. And the other thing that many people don't know, I used to drive taxi. I know the first pedestrian death by car was in New York City, I think 1898, but it was an electric taxi cab that hit a gentleman and killed him. So that's doesn't have to be against electric cars by any means, but it's just it started a long trend, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's really interesting. So to give our audience they're real nerds for the stats, a nickel iron battery, a modern nickel iron battery would be about 100 watt hours per kilogram, whereas a state-of-the-art lithium ion is pushing 300. So about 3 times more weight efficient. But when you live in a home, it really doesn't matter. It's not so much about the weight, and so that nickel iron battery is wonderfully efficient for an in-place installation. I also appreciate
Absolutely
the cleanliness of battery-powered vehicles. I have a 1 kilowatt hour electric bike, and that gets me between 12 and 20 miles at very fast road speeds, so the American cars aren't too angry with me.
Electric bikes are the ultimate EV.
Definitely less than 1% of the resource consumption of a new Tesla. That's what I like to brag about. It's definitely so much more efficient than having to move tons of aluminum along the roadway with you. So there's a lot that we seem to have in common in terms of appreciating efficiency, in terms of our love for proper application of technology. Where do you fall in terms of things like densified housing and mass transit and dense scale power generation for those cities?
See, my attitude is different to you guys because I don't think cities have a future. It's because of this degrowth thing. I don't know if you've noticed.
That's what we were talking about.
Everything is starting to fall apart now, and it's because of resource shortages. For instance, one of the first things that we're likely to run out of is copper. People talk about all sorts of other resources, peak oil, and peak oil has happened. It happened in November 2018, but we have so little copper left that to electrify everything is impossible. In fact, most of what people think is going to happen is impossible because of resource constraints. A good friend of mine, he's also Australian, and he currently lives in Finland, and maybe he's someone you might want to interview at some stage too. His name is Simon Michaud.
Give us put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. He's a mining engineer, and he's got degrees in physics and mathematics, and he's got a PhD in something, and he's working for the Finnish government at the moment. And because he's paid to do all this research, he actually has managed to do a lot of research, and he's the one who's told me that copper is going to be a real issue. But there's all sorts of metals that we're going to run short of over the next 2 decades. Some of them we're going to be running short of this decade, and so a whole lot of things to do with electrification of everything, which is what people are talking about. It just can't happen. Like we just don't have we don't have the resources to build all of the high tension transmission power lines, for instance, or all the transformers, and all the electric cars, because they all need copper. An average gasoline car has like 5 kilos of copper in it. An electric car has 300 kilos of copper in it. There's a huge difference. Like the consumption of resources that go into all this high tech stuff is quite unbelievable. Like people don't even realize, like my laptop, it takes 250 kilos of fossil fuels to make it, because this all this stuff has to be mined, transported from all over the world into eventually one place where it's put together. The resource consumption of all the stuff that we use is just unbelievable when you look into it.
Would there be an alternative to computing that you would endorse, or are we sort of locked into computing as a part of our lifestyle?
Well, it's a huge part of our life now. I mean, everyone's got a cell phone, and a cell phone is a computer. In fact, the progress in computing, in the last 20 years is absolutely phenomenal. Mm-hmm. This is it's a newish laptop that someone gave me, actually, because I'd given up on laptops. My laptop died. It was 12 years old, and I had a good cell phone. I've even written blog posts on my blog with my phone. There's very little that you can't do with a mobile phone. They're so powerful. I mean, if NASA had a mobile phone back in the 1960s when they launched men to the moon, they would have done a better job, because a mobile phone today has way more computing power than what they were using in 1969.
And unfortunately, we find that very often corporations are resisting consumers' right to repair their own devices. They're taking all sorts of shortcuts and dirty tricks to get individuals to consume more and more, and really prevent us from reusing the technology that we've invested in. And so I'm sure that we both agree on that reducing waste in terms of technology and future things, we might share that. However, I'm working in content creation, and so I would be running towards a new PC every 3 to 5 years to keep up with the advances in content creation, unfortunately. And so hopefully I'm able to reuse or downcycle my used computers to a family or a friends or someone who needs one. But yeah, there is a lot that goes into this industry and into creating more content. We need increasing amounts of silicon, and this sort of reminds me that you said we did not have enough. You said that we could not expect renewable energy to save us. Is that only because of copper, or do you see other problems with renewables?
No, the problem with renewables is intermittency.
Yeah.
And it's not just like today it's cloudy here, But it's summer here, so the days are very long, and we never run out of power in summer. But in winter we can do. It didn't happen last year, strangely enough, but the year before we ran out of power for 5 days. I mean, we had days with zero solar energy. Like, there was nothing coming out of the solar panels. It was so dark. And the days are shortish. I mean, they're not, I don't know where you guys live, but the further you are from the equator, the more difference there is between the length of the summer days and
what's
the
your
winter
latitude?
days. 43 degrees south, which is probably about the same as California, I think.
Yeah, it is.
California is about 43 degrees north. I'm guessing, but that's what I think it is. So people who live in, New York or Canada or Europe, actually, because our latitude here is northern Spain. Most of Europeans live north of that, so France, Britain, Germany, all of Scandinavia, Poland, all these places, they're further away from the equator than we are. And so in Germany, in winter, you can forget about renewable energy. It just, or particularly solar, it just does not work. It's just incredible, the difference between summer and winter. And at the moment, because of the war in Ukraine and they're not getting Russian gas, Germany's burning coal like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
In fact, that's happening. That's happening all over the world. There's an increase in coal consumption everywhere, and I think some of it might have to do with the war in Ukraine. But all this stuff was already starting to happen before the war, and I think what's happening is that as there is more and more penetration of renewable energy, there's actually less and less net energy available to the grid, and so when they run short, they start burning coal. Now there's a huge problem that we're facing now, and it's called what I call it the net energy crisis. It takes energy to get energy. So to get coal, you have to mine it. To get oil, you have to drill and so on. And the amount of there's an energy cost. So the energy cost of getting energy has been rising for 50 years, actually, since 1972, roughly. At first, it's imperceptible. It's like an exponential curve. So things start here, and then they go up and up and up, and then they skyrocket like this. And the net energy problem is doing that now. We're on this upward curve where the problem is getting worse and worse. It's taking more and more and more energy to get the energy that we need. And what's left, so for instance, 100 years ago, if you had a barrel of oil, 99% of the barrel was available to do things with. But now we're down to 80%. So 20% of the barrel of oil is needed to get the barrel of oil. And that's getting worse and worse significantly now. Because
they say 50 years,
crisis.
right? That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
50 years.
And so there's less, even though I remember when I started learning about peak oil 20 years ago, we were producing something like 85 million barrels of oil a day. Now it's because of COVID and everything else, it's been all over the place. But you could say that we're producing about 100 million barrels of oil a day, 100 million barrels. But out of those 100 million barrels, only 80 million are available for doing work. And that's less energy than we had 20 years ago. Right?
I remember go ahead.
Well, and that's getting worse. And and the thing is, almost nobody seems to know this or understand it. And so they're calling it inflation, but there's no inflation. We've got an energy crisis.
I recall when I first got into peak oil and the different alternatives to peak oil, it was biodiesel was one proposed solution, and that when you invest into like a palm tree, you basically get 5 parts energy out for every 1 part you invest. So an ROI of 1 to 3 to 1 to 5, almost as good as oil today. Unfortunately, there's other problems with exhaustion of land resources. Palm trees have taken over parts of Southeast Asia, and we have massive deforestation. The IPCC projected that we would need land mass equal to all of Ontario north of the 49th parallel in order to satisfy our energy demands from biofuels and biomass. And that's the 2018 SR15 report. So, of course, biofuels is possibly a partial solution if you don't count the resource exhaustion, the land that we're missing, the competition with food sources, and the problems with particulate emissions, which kills people. So this is absolutely
just that. That's a
it's all terrible.
That's all. No problem.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on the energy crisis. I think that was around 2006, 2008 for me, when I was into the peak oil and the peak oil solutions. Of all the discussions I had back then, and I was a big biodiesel fan, the only argument that I couldn't answer was, well, we should use nuclear and electrify instead. And that's sort of where I find myself today. It is sort of a combination of nuclear energy, efficiency, and is this path compatible with degrowth? I know that Australia, it's not available to you, but is some amount of clean baseload or clean dispatchable energy combined with degrowth a solution in your view?
Okay, well, degrowth is baked in the cake. It doesn't matter whether you like the idea or not. It's going to happen.
Yep.
For several reasons, actually. So apart from this problem that we're having with energy and resources, we also have an economic problem. And see, this is where I'm quite different from most people, is because I see the big picture. So, for instance, when the financial crisis hit and oil hit $147 a barrel, I actually thought, that's it. This is the big crash that I've been expecting since 2000. It's all over. But what happened was that they started printing money out of thin air at unbelievable rates to keep the system going. By the way, the reason that they want to keep the system going is that all the super rich people in the world, they own our debt. So I don't know if you people understand how the economy works, right? Money is created out of thin air, and then it's lent to people who then invest that money into growth. The money to repay the debt and the interest at any time does not exist. So we have to have more money created constantly so that you can repay the debts and the interest. And to do that, you have to have growth. It's the only reason that the authorities all over the world are saying jobs and growth, jobs and growth, jobs and growth. Mm-hmm. It's because otherwise all the debts collapse. Now the rich people, the Bill Gates and all the really rich people in the world, they own our debt. Because see, if we're not in any debt at all, actually, because I worked this out ages ago, so we got out of debt. But if you're in debt, then you've got a liability. But the people who lent you the money, for them, it's an asset. So our debts, the people's debt, is their assets. And that's how they're worth squillions. Like the likes of Bill Gates is only as rich as he is because all the poor people in the world have borrowed bucket loads of money, right? And so all that stuff's been invested into things that he's into. Same with Elon Musk and Bezos and all these people. All the money, all their wealth is fake. It's all fake money, and that's why they want to keep the system running. That's why they have to have growth. It's so that they can remain super wealthy. Mm-hmm. And there's absolutely no other reason why we need to have growth. Growth does not improve our standards of living or any of that sort of stuff. Now, the problem now is that the debt level is so high. It's just mind-boggling, actually. I just cannot get my head around how much money people owe. And anytime, and all money, whether it's existing money or money in the future, it's a call on future growth. It's a call on future resource use. So if there's no growth, the debts are going to collapse. So we're going to see
the debts are
the cancellation
of
of
not the money.
Well, yeah, I think we're getting to a
You're
good
breaking
point
up.
for this. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the debts cannot be repaid. There's no way known that the debts will ever be repaid. So something's got to go. Something has to give. Someone's going to have to wear the consequences. And so we're going to see debt cancellation all over the place. I mean, even Biden is already talking about cancelling some student debts in America. And of course, all the rich people are up in arms saying, oh, you can't do that, because it's our money that you're going to write off, basically. Because if you cancel the debts, that money just disappears. So some wealthy person somewhere is going to wear it. They're going to lose billions. I mean, it might be shared between a whole stack of people, but billions of wealth, billions of dollars worth of wealth will disappear. And so if you want to have all this eco-modernist stuff, if you want to build all these nuclear power stations, where's the money going to come from? Because see, all money comes from debt. It's created as debt. So if you can't loan money out, you're not going to be able to build all this stuff. There's not going to be the resources anyway. For instance, with the electric car system, everyone thinks that 10 years from now we're all going to be driving electric cars. Never going to happen. I follow this guy on YouTube. He's an engineer who's turned into an automotive journalist. He knows a lot about cars, and he's really good at doing research. And recently in Australia, in Western Australia actually, which is the other end of the country for me, they had this conference about mining and the resources needed to run the world. And there's a woman in there who she's a CEO of some, I can't remember what she does, but she's on the ball. She understands what's going on. And she said that the amount of lithium that's needed just to produce what our current expectations are is unavailable. She said, we are flat out getting 50% of the lithium needed to grow the EV production that we think is going to happen. They can't get 50% of it. So if you put that on top of the copper shortage, as I keep saying to people, we built the 20th century from scratch, like 100 years ago, 120 years ago. We had no freeways. Hardly anyone had electricity in their house. Hardly anyone had a car. I mean, I'm 70 years old, but my parents didn't own a car until I was about 10. That's how quickly things have changed in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. So we built the 20th century, as I like to say, one brick at a time, as and when it was needed, with a growing amount of energy that was getting cheaper and cheaper in real terms. Now we have to replace the whole lot in like 10 years, 20 years. We don't have the resources to do it. And we're over our head in debt. Like, I just don't understand how anyone can think that we're going to do that.
How is China doing it then? Because and this is sort of the
China's in a world of pain. China is on the cusp of collapse.
That's what I've been hearing. Yes.
It's incredible.
I don't know if it's true, but
I mean, this COVID business in China, it's just unbelievable what's going on there, because their vaccine doesn't work. It just doesn't work, right? So because it doesn't work, they've been locking people down. So the whole place is like ground to a halt. They're producing absolutely nothing, which doesn't really matter much because we've had our own problems in the Western world. So we're not really buying as much as we used to. But what's happening now is the people in China have been revolting and saying we're sick of lockdowns, we don't want to have any more of it.
Mhm.
So they're letting people out, and their population is really aging. So there's a lot of old people, and as we all know, old people are the ones who are most likely to die from COVID. And I reckon millions and millions of old Chinese people are going to die in the next 12 months. The burden on their health system is going to be unfathomable. On top of that, they've had really bad drought. They're going to have a famine as well. There are going to be food shortages next year. Anyway.
I hope not. I hope not.
But I think China's in a real.
Well, it's a pretty horrible prognosis.
See, I have a saying: prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And that's why I bought a farm in Tasmania, because we grow most of our own food. So even our own meat. We raise animals and we eat them ourselves. We get them killed on the property, and we're running all these freezers. And at one stage last year, we had $4,000 worth of meat in the freezer. We don't need to go to the shops much.
So this is really fascinating to me. This style of living, and I think this is actually the one illustration of what degrowth actually represents, it to the best case from what I've seen. Folks like Jason Hinkle. Sorry, there's two people with very similar names. I get mixed up. Jason Hickel talk about us fleeing the cities, returning to the American suburbs, and surviving on the food that we can grow on the land in the suburbs. Is this really something that's going to sustain 8 billion people on the planet?
No. The suburbs, the houses that they're building in the suburbs now are so big, there's no land left.
In the country.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's plausible. However, there's like you kick the can down the road. There's like a thing, the efficiency gets better and better. And you kick the can down the road. We've always kicked the can down the road. But the can gets smaller and smaller as you get more efficient. Automation is reducing the costs tremendously. I wish that there was that we had subsidized and taxed products for the purpose of making recycling profitable, even if it's not, because if you could do that, and even if they're doing it at a big loss, but the government's paying for it, they'll figure out how to get better and better at it rather than just dumping it. And
okay, can I interrupt there?
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I threw a lot on the table.
What you just said, because you said everyone thinks that someone will figure it out. Someone will figure out how to do whatever, right? And that is a huge problem, because everyone's living in hopium. Well, I've just got a message that my internet connection is not stable, which doesn't surprise me. Anyway, people really think that someone else is going to fix it. That it's like all this bullshit about the fusion thing that you were talking about before. People believe all that stuff, and so they don't do anything. And on the subject of efficiency, I'm going to tell you this little story because it applies to me, obviously. But one of the best thing that I learned when I did my diploma in renewable energy technology was energy efficiency. I learned how to do stuff like our refrigerator uses 1/10, right, 10% of the energy of a regular fridge. That's just one example. So what happened was that I realized that it was possible to reduce energy consumption by 90%. Easy. I reckon we use 5% of the energy that we used to use 25 years ago here. 5%.
Right.
And if anything, our living standard's better. Right? So what happened was I realized that we could save bucket loads on water, food, energy, transport. And see, so I quit work. I stopped working, right? So when you stop working, you don't have to commute. So you don't even need a car. So when I realized that I could save so much, not just energy, but all waste and water and everything else, we could live on nothing. So for quite a while, I didn't have a car at all. We had no power bills. In fact, at the time, we were selling power to the grid from our solar panels, and we were making $2,000 a year profit from our solar energy. And that's literally the money that we lived on. Because if you reduce your consumption down to the levels that we were down to, you almost don't need money. You just, you need money to pay your land tax and stuff like that, but you hardly need any money. But when most people save money like this, what they do is they upgrade their lifestyle. So they'll go and buy a bigger car, or
Devon's
they'll go
Paradise.
on an overseas holiday to the Bahamas.
Yeah,
Devon's Paradise. Okay, I'm glad that you
Exactly.
guys know about that.
Yeah.
See, so I've gone anti-Jevons. I've gone the other stuff. I might as well make the most of it.